Good afternoon to the friends joining in from Europe, and a good morning to everyone joining from USA and Canada. I'm 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 Chairperson of the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan, and we welcome you to our webinar of Data Privacy and Cyber Security in a Digital Era. We start with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Essen, can we have the recordings, please? Okay, thank you, Essen. As the world emerges from the COVID pandemic, cyber threats is one of the greatest global risks, according to a report published by the World Economic Forum recently in January 2022. In today's world, data is the new currency. Data is created in almost every action we do in the digital world. Companies are now under pressure to digitize and automate, but often this is built on the backbone of an aging technology, which exposes them to cyber attacks and ransomware. Businesses collect a large amount of sensitive user data to provide services. So your bank accounts, your credit card details, your address, your telephone number, all details are available on the net. Cyber threats are now growing faster than our ability to prevent and manage them effectively. Let me introduce you to our president of ICAP, Mr. Ashfaq Yusuf Tola, who is president of Tola Associates, to say a few words. Ashfaq is a highly accomplished professional with over 30 years of diverse experience in financial and forensic auditing, management consultancy, tax advisory, and corporate structuring. He has a keen interest in the economic matters of the country. His contribution in policy making is valued, which is reflected through his active participation in Tax Reforms Implementation Committee and Privatization Commission of Pakistan. At ICAP, his contributions are appreciated, previously as the Vice President, then heading the Fiscal Law Committee, the Economic Advisory and Government Relations Committee, and Overseas Committee. He also plays an active role as a member of SAARC, Chamber of Commerce, technical advisor on the SAFA board, which is our South Asian Federation of Accountants, and also chairs the Anti-Money Laundering Committee of SAFA. His tax knowledge of 40+ jurisdictions is well respected. His newsletter covers major developments in taxation. You will often see Ashfaq on TV giving his thoughts and views. Ashfaq, over to you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. 𝐃𝐢𝐠𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐥 Kotwal, our chairperson of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board and council member, my dearest friend Rana Mohammad Usman, the former chairman of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board, and my colleague in the council, my vice president Hasnain Raza Badami, Mohammad Jasir, Mr. 𝐁𝐸𝐬𝐬𝐮𝐫𝐸, advisor of Ministry of IT, Mr. Andrew McDonald, engineering director, automation and control at Unilever, Mr. Behram Farooq, I think if I recall him correctly, is one of our seniors in the profession, and respected fraternity members of ICAP, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is indeed an honor for me to head an institution where you are a member, and I am lucky that I am in the Hall of Fame where most of my gurus were there, and when I used to see their contribution, it was a motivating factor for me to do something for myself, for ICAP, and for the fraternity. And this motivation again brought me to this level, and hopefully people will follow. I am following the footsteps of my elders, and people will follow my footsteps as well. As far as today's webinar is concerned on data privacy and cyber security in this digital era, yes, as Khurshid has said, that everywhere and anywhere in this world post-COVID, we are facing one dilemma. Every 3 months, we have a new wave of COVID, and every 3 months, we are facing lockdown and mostly ending up at work from home. I don't know for how long it will continue, but again, mother is need of all inventions. And again, my perception about the life is perceive an opportunity from the adversity. This is a chance, and that was a chance for the entire world to grow and find some solutions. Data privacy and cyber security is again require immense development. We have got a lot of development. Still we will find that there are so many cyber frauds every day, and we need to upgrade every time and again our data security and this cyber security. This data privacy and cyber security is really a very important topic to understand, and I am happy that we have got a very good panel of Mr. Mohammad Jasser, Mr. Junaid Anam, Andrew McDonald, and Mr. Behram Farooq. I think Nadeem Malik Saab is going to be the moderator. I know him very competent, and this panel, the entire panel is, I think, very competent. And obviously, those who are attending this webinar will gain something out of it, if not everything. So I think this is an ongoing process, and at ICAP, this is our endeavor to keep you abreast of what is going on, and inshallah, in future, with the help of our various committees, we will keep on abreasting you about the latest development. At ICAP, we have also started this data courses now, the large data courses, and our first module was very successfully run by the team, and hopefully we will continue and we will develop those programs and certification courses in other disciplines as well. With these words, again, I am grateful to Khurshid and the entire team for inviting me to give my opening remarks. Thank you very much, Pakistan.
Thank you, Ashfaq. Data security and privacy are currently receiving the much needed attention. Security must be a top priority. I remember during my days at Unilever as the corporate finance director, we were extremely mindful in managing data and information, including that of our employees, customers, and third parties. Although there were no legal requirements, and IT security was an important agenda. While some nations have enacted comprehensive data privacy laws, Pakistan is also gearing up in the race to secure the public data. It is becoming important for governments to protect individual data rights, which is protected by the data protection legislation. Such legislations then bring about accountability. So today we will have a detailed panel discussion with our eminent speakers. I would now like to introduce Mr. Nadeem A. Malik, Director, Oracle, Pakistan, who will have a discussion with our panel. Mr. Nadeem Malik's career spans over 32 years in premier organizations in Pakistan and USA, and his area of forte are strategic development, transformational policy advisor, sales leadership, and business development. He's passionate on value creation and is recognized for his leadership skills in scaling organizations and delivering results. He previously served as the country manager for IBM, the cloud unit, and prior to that, he was general manager for Microsoft and led the digital transformation transformation through inclusive and with a growth mindset. Nadeem started his career in the US with the Department of Commerce and had the opportunity to serve leading organizations. Nadeem is a member of the Prime Minister Task Force on IT and Telecom and Sindh IT Advisory Board. He's a member of Corporate Group of Pakistan, executive member of NAST. He also volunteers for startups. Over to you, Nadeem, for the next 1 hour and to introduce your esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you very much for very elaborated introduction, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I welcome everybody who's joining us on Zoom and Facebook. Today's session is going to be very engaging, very informative, and valuable. I'm sure that's what you're going to find out with the perspective of your profession as well. Madam Chairperson already has set the tone. Data privacy and data protection is one of the key issues at hand for all organizations, because we are in transformation age. We call it the new businesses are disrupting the classical business model, and that business model is all data driven. And how the data is used, how data is protected, how data is governed, and how that is fact every profession across the board is the key question everybody is thinking about it. Today, imagine that your smartwatch is counting your heartbeat, counting your steps, and sharing this data with someone. Mobile phones are also sharing all kind of information to someone. I think you need to protect it. You need to know how people are using it. I have a very esteemed professionals with me today, and I think I feel privileged to be among them as well. So I'll introduce briefly to all of you, and I think then whenever opportunity comes, our panels can also introduce themselves a little bit, elaborate at it. We have Mohammed J. Seer. He's a digital government and public sector consulting leader for the Middle East and Africa at the EY. Mohammed is focused on bringing purpose to digital in the government. He's a thought leader in the area of digital government, citizen centricity, customer experience, and advisor to senior leadership in the government and public sector. Mohammed has obtained his leadership training from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and Harvard Business School, and holds an MBA degree. After spending 12 years in UK government, he moved to the private sector, and now for the last 20 years, he's been advising and helping government and public sector organizations in UK, Middle East, Australia, South Asia, and strategic challenge and digital transformation. Mohammed has also authored a number of thought leadership papers. How can GCC government sustain deliver better citizen experience? What's the cure for better patient experience in GCC? Application of global star rating system for public services, enhanced citizen experience, and many more. Next, we have Mr. Andrew McDonald. Andrew is Engineering Director, Automation and Control at Unilever. Andrew has career span of 24 years, and currently he leads the automation and control program for all Unilever, focusing on getting more out of asset and raising technical capabilities. In addition, Andrew is responsible for digitization of manufacturing and building the digital supply chain for the future. Andrew also leads the supply chain functions program on cybersecurity. Andrew is a UK citizen, currently residing in US. And thank you, Andrew, for joining early morning from the US. We have Mr. Behram Farooq. He's a partner at Farooq Consulting Services. Mr. Behram Farooq is an eminent chartered accountant by profession. He has over 30 years of experience that spans from shop floor to the boardroom. Behram has conducted assignments that consider the interplay, optimization, and oversight of strategy, people, system, and processes. Behram is an innovator who excels at defining the art of possible by challenging the norm, envisioning the revolutionary solution to complex business problems. Behram has served diverse portfolio clients in America, Australia, and EMEA region, both in public and private sector. He offers exceptional combination of multinational and cross-country experience. He's a thought leader, strategy planner, design, transformation, and project management, complexity technology solutions across multiple offerings. Then we have Muhammad Bilal Abbasi. He's a director, IT, Ministry of IT and Telecom. Bilal has a more than decade-long experience in policymaking and digital governance. He's a member of President of Pakistan's Committee on Emerging Technologies, member of Committee on Engagement with Social Media Companies, and focal person for the Ministry of IT on International Payment Gateway, a Ministry of IT and Telecom for Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is SCO, and Digital Cooperation Organization, DCO. Bilal has been a part of policymaking at national level for personal data protection, cybersecurity, cloud governance, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. He also spearheaded the technical sales, development, and implementation of ICT solutions, both public and private sectors. Thank you, everyone for joining today's, and I really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we can have quite an engaging conversation, valuable for our audience. I'll ask each panel members for 2 minutes, not longer than that, because we need to maintain some time. Their perspective, their views briefly about today's topic. If you can share that, and then we can start a little bit more conversation on it. And I'll first I invite Mohammed Sio for that. Mohammed.
First of all, Assalamu alaikum, good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be part of this distinguished panel. I would like to just maybe bring some figures to light, and which is why data privacy and data security is important for us. Because if we look at what's happening around the world, we expect something like 1.2 billion 5G connections by 2025. We expect something like 15 connected devices per person by 2030. And we expect something like 41.6 billion connected devices by around 2025. And something like 175 zettabyte of new data will be created by 2025. So that all points towards the fact. And one last thing as well is that there's going to be something like 4,900, and this astonishes me, 4,900 digital interactions per connected person per day by 2025. So this all points towards a world which is shifting towards an online space. We are doing more and more online, whether it is the socializing, whether it is buying of services, whether it's about selling of services, whether it's about healthcare, all seems to be shifting into this digital space. So protecting the data, securing the data, and ensuring privacy of data when you and I are sharing our data, putting on websites or whatever, making sure that whatever we're giving is not going to be compromised becomes extremely important. Same is for organizations. So on a personal level, it's extremely important because you want to secure, if you're given your credit card details, you want to make sure that those are not lost by the organization and it's not somehow been hacked into and your data is misused. Or if it's your personal data that you're giving maybe to a healthcare provider, all of this is extremely important for us to protect as individuals and as companies. So for me, it is a subject that must be put at the top end of the agenda for the boards, for the organizations, if we really want to survive and thrive in the digital age. Because without securing our data, our information systems, we leave ourselves to vulnerability and potential extinction. Those businesses that have lost data, do you and I go and want to do business with them again? No. So this is extremely important, and I'll just pause it there because it affects all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely right. I think you pointed a very right point that data value is not only for organization, even the people who are basically what you call consumer end, they also very much worry about their own data, and they want to make sure that the data is in their privacy rights are there and their data is protected well enough so they won't be scammed out of it. Andrew, I would like to come to you as well. So just for 2 minutes, just your brief perspective for the audience, so we can set the tone of our discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Mohammed, thanks for all the interesting data and insights there, really powerful message there that you sent. I'm thinking about this webinar from the point of view of manufacturing and supply chain. Again, I'm a professional engineer, chartered engineer from the UK, working a lot in digital transformation. And the key thing for me is how we think about protecting our supply chain assets from cyber threat. This is top of mind for me. One of the challenges that we have, there's two things going on. So one is the whole technology evolution, the Internet of Things technology that's coming down, which brings huge benefits. Equally, there is the merging of operational technology. So this is the technology we use in manufacturing, and IT is converging as well. And we also have in manufacturing and supply chain a legacy of older systems, and this brings vulnerability to many businesses. So part of the thinking I've been doing is really how do we manage that risk? How do we stratify it? How do we understand the risks, and how do we put some measures in place to take care of that? So that's something that keeps me busy. I think the other side of this is there are huge benefits in the digital technology. Some of the things that are emerging in terms of machine learning, artificial intelligence, some of the blockchain technologies are hugely exciting, which will transform many businesses. But that has to be done on a foundation, a solid foundation, and cybersecurity is that foundation, in my personal opinion. So that's just some thoughts from my perspective. Ahmed.
Excellent. I think one of the things which I think we need to understand is data points are not only generated by the humans or people. Now the very valuable data points are being generated by the machines as well, which hold lots of value for the engineering firms or manufacturing industry, because it can help them to do the predictive maintenance rather than preventive and regular maintenance. That's a very important part. So the data is not limited to personal data. Data is very much valuable coming out of the machines, and that gives you a lot of value. Excellent. I think we will just elaborate further
Let's
on
know
it.
that more
I would
later.
like, absolutely. Yeah. I think, so I would just ask the same thing to Behram. If he can just share briefly for 2 minutes what his perspective on to the audience, so then we can take it from there. Behram?
Thank you, Nadeem. And good evening to everyone in Pakistan, as well as good morning to all my friends in North America. The perspective I want to bring to the discussion today is the role of an accountant in the new digital era. And we talk about data privacy and cybersecurity. And you know, as accountants, we sometimes think that is not our job. We are after numbers, we look at financial statements and let the technologists deal with security and privacy and stuff like that. And I would say nothing could be further from the truth. As accountants, we are very well positioned to understand the risks and the controls that we need to build around that to ensure that our data privacy and security is protected. I'll give an example. I mean, we think that this is always happening to others. We are not at risk. We don't have any security issues or privacy issues. I don't know how the televisions in Pakistan work, but in North America, we subscribe to cable, right? And what happens, we get a digital guide on our smart TVs, and all of us are now after smart TVs, and we've got these remote controls and voice enabled and stuff like that. Do you know that for me to get my TV channel guide for the next 1 week, what really happens behind the scene? The cable service provider logs into my router every night at 2 a.m. in Canada, downloads information onto my TV through my router, and this is how I get an updated channel guide for the next 1 week. Think of it for a minute. This is convenience. Yes, I agree with that. But what is really happening? I'm opening up my home network to my cable service provider. And by doing so, I'm exposing myself to all sorts of risks, and none of us even think about it. Now, when we get into the discussion part, I would like to touch briefly upon this, and we'll have further discussions. I won't take the thunder away right now. Over to you, Nadeem.
Thanks, Ram. I think very valid point. How people are taking this data and they're not only monetizing it, but they are customizing the services around you. Netflix is a very classic example of it. They monitor what you watch, and they develop the programs in their own studios on the same genre, and they are challenging big the production houses. So that's very important. What data point we give out has a lot of value for a lot of other people, and they customize centric services as well. But you know how they use it, how that ethical is, and how they preserve it. This is an important part. I come to the Bilal. I think is an important discussion because rules, regulations, laws. So I want to put your perspective into the for the audience, and then we'll take it there. Bilal.
Thank you, Nadeem sir. I'll just carry on from where Mohammed Jasser left. I mean, very interesting figures which have been shared by him. But one important thing which we have heard, all of us, was the trust of every citizen on the system. That needs to be catered. What government has to do is to actually see that, if we have to build that trust, if we have to build the trust of the citizens on certain systems where the data points are generated, then we have to come up with certain solutions where they can actually have faith on. So for that purpose, government is actually taking up many actions in terms of policies and regulations. So there are some proactive approaches where we have come up with our personal data protection bills. We'll discuss that in detail, but the privacy is the most important thing, and there should be the certain rights given to the citizens where they should be the one having all the control over their data and giving their consents that how that data should be treated. You talked about monetization. I think that, every citizen must be given that right. So once their data is there on the cyberspace, then it's the responsibility of the organizations which are dealing with that data, that how to actually deal with it, how to actually treat that data once it is in motion or once it is at rest. So I think these are the things which government of Pakistan is actually looking into, and we are making our policies related to the privacy of the citizen data, and of course we are actually moving towards the protection of our cyberspace as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Where the Madam Chairperson started with that, the data is a new currency. So when we hand over our data to organization, whether this is a government or private or bank, it's just like I'm depositing my own currency. I want to share what I have. My even identity theft happens. So I want to make sure my identity is protected. You're very well, and you're very well right. I think we will further elaborate to it. So I'll just come back to some questions for the panel. So I'll start with Behram first. I think Behram, since maybe majority of the audience is related to you a little bit more, and because you started as a accountant profession, there are new technology words which is more like coming up to it. Trusted contract, which is known as blockchain. No more require of infrastructure, data, cloud computing. Cloud computing mean is my data is now with me. My data is hosted somewhere. Somebody is carrying it, and I really don't know sometimes who is that person. So how that put up responsibility to the accounting and audit professionals, because they rely on this data when they do their own authentication of the reports, and specifically financial or other reports. So how that's shaping the future for accounting profession as well. You mentioned accounting 2.0. Please, if you can just elaborate on it.
Thank you, Nadeem. And you touched on a very relevant topic. And I can tell you from my own experience in Canada, I teach at the University of Toronto. My topic is MIS, and I teach accounting and science students. I'm also a member of the board with CPA Canada, where we're coming up with Accountant 2.0. And the whole objective for that is to enable the accountant to be relevant in the new digital era. And the topics of discussions are exactly what you're talking about, because we have been saying that so far, accountants and auditors have been more interested in financial statements, in numbers, and they're doing more of a post-mortem review of stuff. And when it comes to talking about security, privacy, governance, and stuff like that, they're only looking for a stamp to see did the companies have this thing in place? And if yes, I can rely on the statements. If not, maybe I've got to do more audit procedures. But the thinking is shifting. The thinking is that as auditors and accountants, because we are so engrossed and so much involved in the numbers and we see the processes and everything around us, we need to be in the forefront. And we should not be looking at security as an afterthought to see what's going on, but we should be part of security by design. And what I'm trying to say over here is, as finance professionals, we should be part of the discovery journey that the tech team or the IT team is adopting to see what technology we bring on board. Because we are the ones who can actually put the right controls and stops into play. As an example, blockchain. You talked about trusted contracts. We actually call it a trustless society. So what does blockchain do? It allows people who don't know each other, who normally cannot trust each other, to be able to transact business or whatever assets you put on the blockchain with unknown parties, but by placing some sort of trust on some mechanism, whether it's proof of work, proof of stake. I don't want to get into details over there. But as a technologist, because I play on both sides of the table, we come in and say blockchain is the best thing out there and it provides you all sorts of security. It cannot be hacked into and blah, 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 blah. As an accountant, when I look at it, I said, no, blockchain, it provides us a very weak link. Because what is blockchain after all? It provides you with assurance that a transaction has really happened. But this assurance, in very simple terms, is based on a consensus. 50% vote gives you the consensus on it. What does that mean? It means I'm sitting in Canada and you guys are in Pakistan and it's evening over there. If I asked you to tell me whether in my time zone it is day or night outside, obviously I'm looking out the window, I'm seeing it's day. But if most of the people sitting in Pakistan said, no, Behram, it's night, where you are, it's night. And if majority of those people on this call, if you are part of a blockchain, agreed that it was night, it doesn't matter whether I know that it's day or night. I would have to agree with them or get out of the blockchain. Now think of it in financial terms. If you have a blockchain between different organizations where they're relying on the transaction we put on it, but if there was a 50% attack on the blockchain where 50% of majority would convince the entire membership saying that this is the way the transaction was done, you can actually bring a lot of issues into the system. And I'm not going to get into too much detail there. But what I'm trying to say is the accountant of today needs to understand how these new technologies work. Number one, they don't need to be coders, they don't need to be programmers, but need to understand the concept conceptually as to how these things are being made operational, and then sit back and think what sort of risks are we exposing ourselves to in terms of privacy, in terms of security, and what can we do to prevent all those things. And if there's a message I would like to leave with my audience, don't think that accountants, we need to know balance sheets and P&Ls. We are getting more and more and more towards operational and technological side of the business. And the sooner we get into this, the better it is for all of us.
Excellent. I think excellent point is it's not a technology, it's the perspective you need to see it. You know, the same blockchain will be seen by financial sector separately, manufacturing separately, and of course, accounting people will be separately. I want to come back to Mohammed Seer. You talk about the enormous data happening. You know, there was a chart on internet, how much data goes in 1 minute, and that's really the big thing. And the way we go to the 5G era, this whole data is going to multiply by many, many times. How the organizations can bring this resilience? How this government's bringing this framework together? Because you have worked with the government and you have advised them, because it's not any small or big organization alone cannot manage the whole thing. It's just a whole ecosystem which connect each other. What's your view on that and how that have an impact on it? Mohammed, you're mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the most famous quote for 2021 and 2022 is going to be, "You are mute." Yes, so if we look at the subject of data alone and look at it from different lenses, there's obviously a need for data. More and more, the talk is about, and the expectation is about, that we will move towards data-driven governance models. Data-driven decision-making will become more and more prevalent. So we need the data, and that's extremely important for us to strategize, for us to make decisions. But at the same time, as you said, there is vulnerabilities around the data that you collect. So what I see with governments around the world is they are starting to introduce the whole concept of data management, which wasn't necessarily there before. It was maybe fragmented. And this idea of having a chief data officer and looking at the organization's maturity when it comes to data, receiving data, storing data, having data ownership, making sure that it's very clear who owns the data, who is responsible for data. And as Bilal was saying earlier, data ownership will always or should always reside with the person who is giving the data. And this is the principle that Europe and other countries are looking to move forward with, that the right of the data should sit with the person who actually originally created the data. But how do you protect that data? How do you put in place models that will enable for a structured way of capturing and retrieving data, making sure that we have a framework through which we can look at the maturity of the organization. Where do we stand? And governments are starting to introduce this around the government itself, but also they're trying to introduce these principles and ideas for the private sector to also embrace. And one of the things I've seen in particular as a new play is to look at the ICT companies who are actually providing the advice and services to private sector and government, to look at their maturity in how mature are they in giving the advice on data security and data privacy and all those factors that are important, and helping with building the security models within the actual organization. If the company which is providing the advice is weak, then obviously the advice they provide is going to be weak. So that's something I'm seeing quite a bit happening. And of course, on the security side, this transformation from thinking that cybersecurity is a problem to be managed by the IT function towards it being a problem that actually should be managed through a CISO, and that person should be reporting to the CEO, not the IT function, and looking at data security or information security as a whole of company problem or organization problem. So everyone should be aware of it, and each one of us have a role to play in securing that data, not just the IT function, is the kind of the trends that I'm seeing. And I think they will more and more progress, because that's the only way you can really build resiliency of securing the data in the organization, if everyone knows the vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. I think, the data is driving the digital revolution, and this digital revolution is creating a lot of function in organizations. Now we start seeing a chief digital officer in an organization, I think, which is basically driving the digital strategy of the organization. Very well onto that, because it's not only how the data collection is, how you govern the data. You talk about the governance, you talk about data security and privacy. So I think that's sometimes for audience or people like who are just entering into this era just get confused. I will come to the Andrea for this question, and maybe Bilal can also elaborate after that. Let's elaborate on data privacy, data protection, data sovereignty, data governance. I mean, this is not one thing. They are not interchangeable terminology. Each terminology holds a lot of value its own. Can you elaborate for our audience with some simplify it or demystify it, please?
I'll do my very best. I mean, I think the key things here are about for certain we need to consider these terms in terms of confidentiality of the data. There's obviously personal information, you alluded to that as well, that's being exposed. So from the area that I focus in on, it's really understanding that personal data and the integrity of the data and processes to make sure we've got the right mechanisms and tools to protect that data, making sure it's available and making sure that we have safety and security built into it. So again, the data that I've been thinking a lot about is as I mentioned before, in supply chain and manufacturing, is anything to do with the operation and really making sure we preserve that effectively and control access to it as well. I think that's the main thing that we've been working on. When I think about some of the best practices in that space, One of the things that we've been considering a lot is looking at it from a risk-based perspective. So really stratifying the operation and understanding, where the potential risks are, business integrity risks are, with exposure of having people getting access to our data and using it effectively against us. So, one is about that sort of stratification of the business, understanding where the major issues could be, and then building safeguards against it. So, what we've been working on is, first of all, a sort of 4-step process. One, as I mentioned, is stratifying, understanding the business risk, and then taking a view on understanding the assets that are holding the data and storing that information, being able to adequately segment the networks that they sit behind to make sure that there are adequate controls and the data is being treated properly. The next part of that is really securing the data in terms of managing the legacy systems, routine basic cyber hygiene tools and techniques, which I can go into in a bit more detail, but basically making sure there's anti-malware, access control, and threat detection. So really taking a holistic view of really protecting that data that's there. The other point I just want to make quickly is you mentioned before, Nadeem, about it's not just humans that are creating data, but machines are doing that too as well. One of the key things that we're discovering, or I'm discovering in my journey, is the codification of processes. We're learning how to codify our processes and reinforce those processes. So again, there's a lot of data that's being generated from systems, which in turn is becoming sort of information that we're using more broadly, and ultimately knowledge and wisdom. So we're really learning a lot about our processes through the data. So again, there's a benefit, but equally the point I was making before is about control of that information and data is really, really important.
No, absolutely great. Bilal, I want you to elaborate these terms in terms of policy. Of course, the government sees all these privacy, protection, governance as a policy matter and as a regulation and law matter. And certainly, I think now a lot of question comes into it. Digital currency, digital financials coming up to it, and how the customer is basically feel confident about it. So if you can just take that from that perspective.
I think this is the most important thing, because whenever you talk to somebody regarding their privacy or the security, they mix up things, because there is a huge difference between data privacy, data protection, data governance, data sovereignty. These all are different things. So we tried our best to cover or come up with definitions which are most widely acceptable. For the audience, I just would like to, differentiate between all these. For us, data privacy or information privacy is a branch of data security concerned with the proper handling of data, consent, notice, or maybe regulatory obligations. But when you talk about data protection, it's a set of strategies and processes you can use to secure privacy, availability, and integrity of your data. Now, when you talk about the difference, usually the term data protection and data privacy are often used interchangeably. But there is an important difference between the two. Data privacy defines who has the access to data, while data protection provides tools and policies to actually restrict access to the data. Now, these are the terms which needs to be read the way world or the international community reads it. But when we talk about data governance, it's a collection of processes, rules, policies, standards, matrices that ensures the effective and efficient use of information in enabling organization to achieve its goal. So you govern that data, that how efficiently it will be, policies will be implemented, the procedures and rules, how efficiently that will be collected, used. So that's how you do the governance, because again, it is different than protection and privacy. Sovereignty itself says a lot, but when you talk about data sovereignty is the idea. Usually, when we talk about the data sovereignty, it's the idea that data are subject to the laws and governance structure within the nation it is collected. So So while we were preparing our cloud policy, we had to take care of data sovereignty. At the same time, when we were engaged in drafting our privacy law, it was very important thing to cater for data sovereignty because cross-border data flows are important, but at the same time, they pose a lot of challenges, and you need to address those challenges. So for us, we had to go through all the definitions which different bills have adopted, and again, for us, the most important thing was that what exactly is our local context, what exactly the Pakistani, what are our challenges, and then what are the best practices. We had to align both of the things. Last important thing is cyber security, or maybe the cyber threats. Sometimes, again, in my initial talk, I was discussing that cyber security or the crime, sometimes they are dealt when you are actually using that data. For example, if certain data flows on certain cyberspace, you need to protect that. You need to protect that information. You need to block the unauthorized access, destruction, disclosure, or modification of the data, or maybe the denial of service as well. Threats can arise from the human actions and natural events as well, and some malicious actors can penetrate as well. So, looking at all these things, when we talk about privacy and the security, we need to see that, privacy, security, and protection, these all are different things. And then data governance is actually a mechanism how to use all these elements to govern that data. So these are my 2 cents on the
excellent. I think the good thing is that there's a lot of policies and a lot of laws and drafts are on the table with the cabinet, and we are concerned, and I think we know that Pakistan, the people in Pakistan and the businesses who are in Pakistan doing all this digital transformation are going to be governed by those. I'm very impressed with our audience engagement, this whole panel discussion. Honestly, I'm overwhelmed with a lot of questions. So I'm gonna start kind of filtering out few questions, and audience can take it. Behram, I'll take this, I'll put this question to you. Sulman Afzal is one of our audience who's attending this. I think very pertinent question, which I think you can also share your experience coming from Pakistan and also having an exposure of the Canada and professional experience there. What certification, education, and what routes they can adopt in learning phase, so they can gear up for the future of the profession, and how they can be involved in this IT security audit, IT audit, and how this profession can adopt that, if you can elaborate.
Thank you, Nadeem. In terms of certification, I would say certification is one thing, but you need to have the relevant experience as well. And as a profession, as a body that produces future CAs in Pakistan, I think it also falls upon ICAP to provide those sort of knowledge to the members. I'll talk about Canada, for example, as to what we do over here. Right now, in terms of certification, the closest I will see is what is being provided by ISACA, where we have 𝐁𝐸𝐶𝐸, 𝐶𝐸𝐿, and now we've got new certificates coming up for certified in emerging technologies and stuff like that. These are specialized bodies, and ISACA is not the only one. There are other bodies also, which provide certifications that are being recognized by institutes such as the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Canada. And I'm sure in Pakistan, you also have a body for ISACA, and you can team up with them. In terms of what they can study, I would say they don't need to get technical, because in the end, if a person wants to study finance, there's a reason why the person chose that route, because we like to work with numbers and processes. It's about people, process, technology, as we say that. We don't need to get too complicated with code and programming, but we need to understand how these impact our business processes and eventually the numbers we are trying to rely upon. In terms of certification, I would say look at what others are doing, ISACA being an example, and see what is prevalent in your own country. Because if you're trying to do something within Pakistan, you've got to see what is relevant out there. And in the profession, you would have different bodies, and I'm not aware of the bodies in Pakistan. But from a North American perspective, I can tell you that ISACA is a forerunner, and we provide specified training to individuals and members that are wanting to go down this route, whether they want to understand emerging tech, whether they want to understand security. There's a lot of focus on cybersecurity, cyber threat, data privacy, data governance, in fact, and data ethics. And there's no particular qualification or degree that we say that we need from an employer perspective. But depending on which part of the world you are in, obviously there are certain certifications that are more in vogue. And just speaking from a Canadian perspective, I'm saying over here, ISACA leads the way.
No, I think you're right. And just let me, for the audience purpose as well, ICAP is holding a lot of programs, data and data analytics, AI, multiple programs. I think more detail can be shared on ICAP website as well, and maybe we can share that later on. And this certification for IT audits, security audits, they're also available in Pakistan, and a lot of professionals from various parts of this are adopting it. And I think thank you very much for that, sharing it. Mohammed, I just want to come to you for the government's role in ensuring that there are people who are qualified to do the qualified job, specifically when it comes to the sensitive positions. How that is coming into the framework part, and how you can elaborate the profession or professionals who are in this field can get up themselves as well, and how is it happening in MENA region as well?
Two things before going into the specific of the profession itself. One of the biggest move that every country needs to make, if they haven't already, is to think about the future workforce as a general, and digital literacy as being at the heart of that. Because what will define our future competitiveness as nations is how digitally literate are we, our populations. So digital literacy will become a differentiator between developed, and nations which are left behind, very similar to how literacy was. And the difference between the two, and why it's important for governments to really, and countries to embrace this, is because whilst literacy about studying a particular language or mathematics or accounting, etc., is very professional driven, and there are some basics to it. But literacy of digital literacy means that in the future you may struggle to operate personally in the world, because if everything, let's assume a world where maybe everything or almost everything is online, and if you're not digital literate, then how will you be able to manage your life? So that's one thing which I see a lot of governments taking charge of, and even countries like Singapore, which is considered one of the most advanced digital nations, have programs on digital literacy for the populations which are far behind, especially the senior citizens. So that's something I would say is it's important to keep in mind, and we should be driving and trying to encourage that agenda in Pakistan as well. The second is about the professions. So what we are seeing is a lot of countries at a policy level starting to think about how to drive the educational change in these professions. So how to ensure that digital or technology is embedded into medical education or financial education or engineering. So how to make sure that these elements are embedded in. So that's one movement I'm seeing at a policy level. And the third is about how to look at crafting or encouraging professional bodies like ICAP, for example, to look at their profession and try to define standards or maturity models that can be applied, and encouraging companies to look at embracing those models. So these are the three things I would say when it comes to policy level, what I'm seeing around the world in this space.
Excellent, excellent. I think that's certainly a very lot of value. But I'll just want you to briefly, one of the questions, which is again very much to the government of Pakistan perspective point of view. We talk about crypto ban happens. Sometimes we hear certain application platforms cannot operate out of the Pakistan. With the data protection law at the moment, sometimes law becomes more scarier than give you the comfort of being protection, rather than giving me protection, I'll become more scared. I know this law can come haunt me. Please just a little bit, I think briefly elaborate on those, because this is also a very common question asked by our audience as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have been listening to this questions like since long. So, Pakistan actually started making its personal data protection law in 2018. That was the first time an effort was made and a draft was prepared, and that was put on website. But then the regime was changed, the government was changed, new people came in. So what they did, they actually picked up that law, and then they started aligning it with the gold standard, which is normally called as GDPR. So what we did, that we have altogether changed that law, and we tried our best to make it more business friendly as well. And at the same time, we should not be compromising on the privacy as well. So we came up with a draft, and in 2019, we put up a draft on our website. We received comments from international community like Facebook, Google, Twitter, Amazon, and then we received comments from our local businesses. I must be talking about Jazz, our telecom operators. They have given the comments. Our private sector software houses, Pasha, they gave the comments. And then the government organization like NADRA, FBR, SCCP, and State Bank, they have given their feedback on it as well. Now we have to understand this part, and this must be, our audience must know about this thing. The requirement of international community, the requirement of our private sector and the government organization is altogether different, because this law is going to be applicable not only on private sector, but the government will be equally responsible and responsive to this law as well. So we had to strike a balance. To strike a balance, you had to let go of certain things which government wanted to, and we have to adopt the international best practices. So with the feedback we have received, now we were able to actually put that final draft online, and there were again certain views and comments, certain bashing to the government that, okay, this law is not good even. So there was the biggest problem people identified was the cross-border data flows. The international organization wanted that because it hurt their business if we stop that. And if we ask them to keep a copy of data in Pakistan, then it increases their business cost. So we had to come up with certain things. So in definition, we have changed certain things which actually help the organization to now at least be at ease. At this point of time, our personal data protection, we have sent it to cabinet for approval, but there is a long way to go, because once it go for a principal approval, then from there it goes to the National Assembly. From National Assembly, it goes to Senate, and from Senate, it goes for the promulgation to President of Pakistan. But we tried our best to incorporate and make it more business friendly, and at the same time without compromising the privacy of the citizen. So this is the stage where our personal data is right now. Maybe later on we discuss more that what exactly are the contents of that personal data protection bill, and how we actually read it along with other policies, because you cannot actually read it alone. You have to read the personal data protection bill And at the same time, if some breaches happen, you need to invoke the cybersecurity. And at the same time, you have a cloud policy where you have to see all these classifications. So this is the stage where the personal data protection bill is right now.
Excellent. I think that we hope that we all feel safe once this all a lot are promulgated, and rather than scared our organization towards it. So Andrea, I want to come to you for the framework. I mean, Unilever, so engineering point of view, the framework, I think we discussed that. Can you elaborate how that frameworks can, organization can also take a guidance and guideline from that? And what are those principles of this framework which could be adopted and customized for the organization when they come to how they can hand and monetize, manage the data and in ethical and moral ways? You know, some of the bigger question coming up from OECD is data can also become a disadvantage to certain communities or certain class of the people around the organizations or within the country as well.
So thank you for that. Yes, so I've been thinking about the so obviously cybersecurity represents a potential cyber threat. As a result of poor cybersecurity, represents a potential threat to any operation. So again, I think I've been thinking of it in terms of business continuity risk, and you're making sure that's front and center. So for many of the people on the call today who are managing complicated businesses, you're managing risk all the time. Cybersecurity is another one of the risks to be mitigated and managed. The challenge is there's quite a bit of complexity in the way of doing that. But clearly, having a clear leader in a chief information security officer who's responsible for taking a stance on cybersecurity protection is a good first step. Again, in my experience, a lot of the challenge we've been focusing on is in the operational technology area, which is in the factories and factory floor systems and extended supply chain. So that gives rise to a challenge of having a CISO and team who are OT, operational technology savvy, who can build a strategic plan to address that is one thing that we've been working on. Clearly, having the right stakeholders and sponsorship within the organization is really important as well. So I think this top level part of this work about taking it from a business continuity risk and having the right processes and tools in place to address that risk is a key part of the strategy. And I did elaborate before, the sort of steps that we should take from a lower level. So from a bottoms up, one role that I had, we identified the potential risk, teamed up with the IT organization. The enterprise IT organization generally don't have as much knowledge in the industrial control system space, which is where the vulnerabilities are in many places right now. And having an approach to really assess that. And I think I outlined before what the sort of 4 steps are for doing that. So again, I think that the challenge is making sure that people are visible. One of the interesting insights is if you run a very successful cybersecurity program and you don't have any issues, then no one notices how successful you've been, which is always quite amusing. But nonetheless, it needs to be focused on very carefully. So I've talked a lot about the structural side and the technical side. There's also a cultural side as well. So one of the things I'd urge people on the call today to think about in your businesses is how much awareness is there in your organization of cybersecurity. Simple things like having people's background screens, having cybersecurity messaging on there, remembering to change passwords, not sharing passwords, simple cybersecurity hygiene activities such as that are really important baseline activities that can be done. Gamification of cybersecurity as well, giving people awareness, training all the organization in cybersecurity policy and practices. And sort of going back to the information question before and the data integrity piece, having a robust policy on data protection and data privacy, data sovereignty is something, again, that should be rolled out in organizations as well. So there's a couple of things just to, I hope I've answered the question fully. It's a big subject, though. I could talk for quite a while on this, so I'll try not to.
No, thank you very much. I think we'll do that. Behram, I'll just come back to you now. future is always a question. I mean, we ask this question, how to get ready for it. But now I want to ask same question in a different perspective. What is future? What is this new framework of accounting 2.0? Because of course, a lot of people think technology is eating up professions. And sometimes, people get a little bit scared about, that my profession is going to be beaten up because I'm doing a mundane job and the technology is going to eat up the mundane jobs. But that is not the case. The only profession changes its shape. The profession becomes a little bit more, I would say, into the new form. It takes up the new forms. I think accounting and other profession is a very, very important part of it. Every organization, because it's a what we call backbone of it. And how is changing in a wider perspective, the worldwide. And if you can just elaborate on that part.
Thank you, Nadeem. And you said a few things that really spoke towards me. One, you said that our profession becomes mundane. Far from it. We are not mundane, and we are actually the backbone of an organization, if you look at it properly. And in terms of future, with the new digital era, we need to retool ourselves. So Accountant 2.0 in Canada is all about retooling the accountant of the future, where the accountant needs to be more data savvy. So there's a lot of focus on data over here, starting from data wrangling to data analysis to data presentation. And along the way, we talk about data privacy, data governance, data ethics. Ethics is a big buzzword over here these days, and I'm saying it in a best possible manner, because more and more we are beginning to realize that the individuals that are creating the data should be the owners of their own data. What has been happening in the past is we've been giving away our privacy without even thinking about it. And now we need to become more aware of how our data is being utilized and consumerized in the market, and how can we protect ourselves. And the best profession to help the population at large is the accounting profession, because we come from a place where we always talk about trust, and we look at how we can bring trust to the public at large, whether it's auditing simple financial statements of a public company or going and giving third-party certifications. I'm not very familiar with the Pakistan market, but here we have a lot of third-party assurances going on, like SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3. SOC stands for System and Organization Controls, where you see what's happening in the world. Now, when we look at the new technologies coming on board, these are new flashy toys, if I may put it in simple language. Blockchain, yeah, we all love to be on top of blockchain, want to use it, but that is not a solution looking for a problem. Like sometimes people get carried away. Oh, let's do blockchain, let's do AI, let's do this, and let's do robotic bots. RPA, this has been around since, I would say, before the turn of the century, but it really picked up around 2015, where people were getting more and more into it. And now they think, with bots coming in, our profession will get mundane, our jobs will be lost, and tomorrow the bots are going to take over and do all our jobs. No, I don't agree with that. Not true at all. Because what is going to happen is we are going to take our tasks, and I'll make it simple. When we work with Excel, we create Excel macros. Now, if we create macros in Excel, or we write some Visual Basic code in Excel, does it take away our role? I mean, we are still the business analysts that we were. We are still looking at the information that we are doing. We are just making our lives easier by taking advantage of those macros. The same is with bots. So with RPA bots, all it's doing is, rather than working within one application, it's working across your entire ecosystem. The challenge that brings on board is, just like human beings, bots can also make mistakes. Don't think otherwise. Don't think that by introducing robotic bots, you're going to make life easier for you. Because all you're trying to do is, whatever work a human is doing, you're telling the bot to do it more efficiently with much greater speed. So if you're making a mistake, if your process has a flaw in it, or if a formula that you've created has a technical error in it, the bot will religiously create that mistake over and over again, but 1,000 times faster than you. So guess what? You're compounding your issue now. So if you have not looked at your processes properly, and if you've not looked at, I don't know, if you're doing some analytical review and not looked at your work properly, and there's some fundamental flaws in there, you're going to expound those flaws by using bots. Because yes, they're efficient, but they're also efficient making the mistakes that you were making. And you might be making one mistake a day or one mistake a month, and they'll do it much faster for you. The other thing, segregation of duties. Basic tenet of finance professionals is that conflicting tasks should be segregated from each other to make sure that you can rely on your systems. What I've seen in Canada for my own clients, because they can bring these bots on board, and because in the bots you pay a license for it, right? And the bot vendors are saying, oh, you can use this license to do multiple tasks. So suddenly I brought the bot to do an AP function, but now I'm wanting this bot to do AR, and I want to do something else because I'm paying for license. I don't think about security in my mind. I'm thinking, how can I best take advantage of money I've paid and I make the bot do more and more processes? But in the process, I'm creating an SOD risk, which would not be in the human world. So now think of it. As humans, if you're worried that your job has been taken away, I would say, no, switch back and see what new jobs are being created. In the past, when computers were not there, I can still remember a day when computers were brand new for us. I mean, we started learning with typewriters. The typists and the stenographers of the old days were worried that computers will come and take their jobs away. Now look at what happened. Did it take their jobs away? Yes, it did. But what did it do instead? It created new roles. It created business analysts and data analysts. And those same people that were going to become stenographers and typists are doing a much better job with computers and working with that. So what I'm saying, with new technologies coming on board, our roles will shift. We will not become redundant. We will actually mature and grow both personally and organizationally into the new era. And that is where the accountant 2.0 comes in, because as the I would say the backbone of an organization, we need to be able to stand strong and guide others. And with all due respects to the engineers and other professionals in the group, I think sometimes people think of accountants as people who deal with dry topics. No, I think we deal with very relevant topics of the day, and we're out there in the forefront across all processes. So we are best placed to deal with the future. That's what I would say.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the right. And just let me share something, and maybe you guys can elaborate on thoughts. There was a movement, and this is still going on. The movement is when this industrial automation started happening, and the robots start taking the human jobs. Before there was a what would you call assembly lines, and assembly lines were replaced by the robots. And a lot of now sophisticated jobs are being done by the robots. So when the robots are introduced in any assembly line, it means they replace a human. When they replace a human, it means the human get the salary, he spent the salary out in economy, he pay taxes. Robots don't pay taxes. The government start thinking about it. How do we do this? How do we do tax on robots? And the manufacturing industry says, you cannot tax robots because we pay the tax what we produce. So that is the classic example of future of accounting and professionals and everything. Is the new shift is going to create a new problem, and the new problem is going to needed a new thought process. I remember attending one of the orientation in the university when my son went to this university, and they said, we're going to prepare you for the problem which are not known to us. That was the very first sentence the orientation guy said when he started attending college 6 years ago. So I think that's what the concept is. Future is something which is emerging, and the whole mind shift, what we call growth mind shift, need to come into it. How do you tax robots? And people's going to resist that. Andrew, you can also elaborate on it, because I'm sure a lot of automation is reducing the one, what you call classic taxation, but introducing some other taxation coming into it. And that's how our process is done by the professions.
It's interesting. I've not really thought about it from a taxation point of view, but certainly from a technology adoption point of view, given that a lot of thought. I mean, the point you made before about introduction of new technology and how that displaces or can displace people. I think the point was made very well before, that there's a displacement of jobs. It's a change of type of work. Certainly, we're seeing that part of the work that in many of the factories I've been working in is equipping the operators and the people who work in the factories. They still need to be there because there's still a process of continuous improvement that needs to be invoked. And part of the work is helping train people on the use of the new technology and and how to manage it. But it's more about going back to the point we opened up with, really, about the data. Say quoted all the data statistics for us. What we're creating is more and more data, and the challenge is to turn that into intelligence and wisdom and knowledge. And that's what we're expecting people to do. So having to build a plan for upskilling people who are doing manufacturing jobs, which many people would consider to be relatively blue collar jobs, giving those people the skills that they need to acquire data, visualize the information, describe the phenomena within the data, analyze it and drive improvement. So, seeing it's definitely a need to upskill the workforce. The factory workforce of the future need to have those skills, not only in managing the technology, but managing the data, drawing the insight from it, and then driving the action to make improvement. But to be quite honest with you, I've not really considered the taxation. Taxation of the part is quite an interesting concept.
The government, when it was a classic example in the Sweden government started doing it, is if you put 5,000 robots, 5,000 jobs are not there for the timing until you reskill them. So who's going to pay the taxes? Who's going to put the money into the economy? So that's something which is not that they cannot be reskilled or relearn or something other, but some of the tax deficiency. Mohammed, I'm just going to ask, because the question is, I have not touched one topic which is very important, is the AI. In Middle East now they have a minister for artificial intelligence. AI based upon access to large set of data, and I'll come that the same question to Bilal as well. I think start thinking your thought process around it. When you do the AI, you cannot do AI on a small set of data any organization hold. You have to have this open government data policy, and there is a program worldwide which people are adopting it. So how your experiences being in managing MENA region and then the government, Bilal, I'll come to the same question. How Pakistan is seeing it? AI, we talk about it, but we don't know how this large data set can be collaborated and how this open government data program can be incorporated as well. The same question I think I'm going to ask you, Mohammed, if I want to start with you.
I think we need to look at this move in a broader context, because establishing the Ministry for AI, and the same things happened in Saudi Arabia. They have established the Saudi Authority for AI and Data. And there is a much larger thinking at play. If I take on some of the conversations I've heard, and also recently I was having a conversation with the Chief Information Officer, the Government Chief Information Officer from Estonia, which is one of the most advanced, as you know, digital countries in the world. The future seems to be around bottom-up data and building of services of the future. So most of the time in government policy making, and services are being developed top-down. What some of these leading countries are looking at is that actually there is a huge amount of data which we are capturing. How can we use AI and machine learning to actually help us build services of the future? So that's some of the future thinking, say travel of direction. So the Ministry of AI in UAE, one of the things they're trying to do is really stimulate the whole industry, put policies, put frameworks, and also create encouragement for the use of AI across the government, but also how to look at regulation or creating the framework for regulating this industry, which itself will create vulnerabilities. So classically, we are seeing a lot of regulatory sandboxes being established by organizations, governments, not just in this part of the world, but other places, to look at the exploration of how AI can really make a difference and in our day-to-day life. So that's kind of something that we need to keep in mind, that it is not just about the now and here and now, it's about where we are heading with all of this. And the more data we create, the more valuable we can become as governments to actually drive policies and services that are actually very specific, for the citizens itself. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I see it, at least. I don't know, Bilal, maybe you can elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask the Bilal different perspective. The AI requires large data sets, not from one organization. Multiple organizations are sharing the data sets, and you derive a very specific model. Here, nobody wants to share the data. Everybody holds down the data just like the dear life. So that's something which is, I think, open government program. I think I initiated that a long time ago with the government. Pakistan has not signed it yet, but of course we need to work on it. So and this AI and data collaboration can bring the innovation. Without that, you cannot have that innovation as well. So a lot of government perspective, a little bit more policy point of view.
Well, I think I totally agree to what Sir said, that, in terms of data, bottom-up approach is required. And when you say that bottom-up approach, take data as the minutest level, and then start building on top of it. Now, what we are trying to do is that whether you use it in AI, whether you use it in blockchain or any other technology, let's not talk about technology. Let's talk about that, how to deal with it. Now, I think that first you need to classify the data. Once you classify the data, then you can actually see that, okay, this type of data can be governed this way. Now, in Pakistan, we have so many challenges. One of the biggest challenges that organizations don't talk to each other. When you talk to FBR, they don't give data to probably NADRA. NADRA doesn't give data to telecom operators. Telecom operator doesn't share their data to private sector. And that's how we are, not actually moving towards the innovations part. What we are trying to do is, first, we would like to classify the data. We want to come up with a classification part. That's why we started a policy. We started building a policy that is called as data governance policy. And there are two critical elements which we are going to cover in that. First one is the data classification. We'll classify the data. And I just want to highlight that once we classify the data, it will tell us that, okay, this part of the data is an open data, and you can actually throw it in the market and get your innovations done through the industry, through the academia, or whatever. And then the second important thing of our policy, it's a critical part, and that is the sharing mechanism. We are going to actually build a sharing framework. We are also going to build a framework, interoperability framework, that how one organization is going to share data with another organization. Sir talked about Estonia. Estonia has built an X road. Through that X road, they have connected all the services, and in layman term, it's an exchange layer. You exchange data on that layer. You shake hand on that layer, and that's how. The important part is, in Pakistan, there is a fear that if we lose data, probably we'll become redundant. Now, just to cater for, just to give a confidence to the organization, we are telling them that all you have to do is leverage your data to the layers only. We'll process your requests over there, and your data will be sent back to you. The results will send back to the organization which requires data. Now, one important thing, we all know that good data leads to a good decision, right? So once, what I see that, prior to 1947, we had silos, we had colonies, and our forefathers, they have actually gathered those colonies to build a nation. Similarly, here in Pakistan, we have the colonization of data. And until and unless we jumble that up together, we brought things together, we start sharing things, we won't be able to make good decisions. So if you ask me, if we won't do that, if we don't come up with such policies, the head of the organizations or the head of the country, they won't be able to make good decisions because there won't be a good data available. So once the data is actually shared, it makes good information, it gives you analytics, and we are focused. We are trying our best to complete this policy by March and start implementing it. So these are my 2 cents on it.
Nadeem, can I just add one thing very quickly
Absolutely.
to that, which
Go
is
ahead.
important to distinguish. When we talk about open data, and we talk about government open data, we are not talking about sensitive private data. That will never get open. No government opens that. And it's not that data that you and I want to keep private. It's more transactional image, giving a sense of what's happening. For example, I know that so many people are living in this part of the country of this age group, for example. That kind of data is very valuable. And it's that kind of data we're talking about. And the second thing, just to again add, because it was mentioned from an Estonia perspective, and there's two models to looking at this data exchange model. One is the South Korea model, which is centralized. They keep data in only one place. All government data is centralized and kept in one place. The Estonian model, which is a dispersed model. So the data is not kept in one place, it's all connected through the X-road. Pros and cons for each. Obviously, if it's dispersed, it means when you have an attack, the vulnerability, your resilience is higher because the attack will only happen on a particular part of your data, not the whole data. If you're in one place, you will need to make that much more secure, because if an attack happens, everything is exposed. So in Estonia, one of the things which they've done to bring the trust of you and I, as a citizen, you can actually go and see who has been using your data. There's a whole log, right? So I can go and see, for example, a doctor in that district accessed my data about my home address. Firstly, they have made it need-based only. So not every government department can access every data. It's based on a need. So if you have the right and have a need to look at my address, then only you can look at it. But in the early days when they were doing a lot more, it was a little bit more open. And people got actually sacked for looking at someone's home address, ex-wife or ex-husband, want to know where they live today or what have you. So those kind of privacies. So you and I to be able to see the log of all my data, who has gone in and seen my data, whether it's a police, whether it's anyone, right? You know, the medical profession. So that is all tracked. So it brings a lot of trust. That's the level of trust we need to get to at some point, so that we know that, for example, our data is secure. So I thought I'll mention these two things, important to.
No, great thing, great. I think we are quite fired up and engaged. Data, a lot of value, you know, we have a lot of values, and people start seeing the value. When you put the dollar number on it, when the WhatsApp was sold for $19 billion, they were loss-making entity. And somebody paid $19 billion for it because of the data they had. IBM bought weather.com, and somebody asked, why you bought the weather.com? And IBM said, I collect 1 billion points every 60 seconds. Imagine the value we gather. So I think the data in dollar terms amount is enormous. Data in a value point of enormous. So we had wonderful discussion. I wish we can go on further, but I just want to give you another opportunity for a minute or two to have your last thoughts. Wrap it up on that, and I'll start with the same order. I think I'll start with Mohammed with you.
Thank you, Nadeem. I'll keep this very short. Really, the 2-3 key messages that I want to always share. One is we need to think of our journey towards a digital world in a very structured way. We need to distinguish, there is a difference between an IT strategy and a digital strategy. One talks about how we can help execute our strategy. The other one actually is about answering a question of how can we survive and thrive in the digital age. So if we think of our profession that we're talking about from an accounting perspective, what does it mean for an accounting profession? How will it evolve and change in the future? We are seeing a lot more digital platforms being built of how to do auditing and how to provide services in a different way. So that's one key message. The second is, I would really request everyone to think of security by design. Think from the perspective of making security a problem for all of the organization, not just the IT function. And it's about building things from scratch. How do you make sure you protect your data, your information, even your hard copies of information? Because a lot of times these are the things which actually create the vulnerabilities for us for the attacks. Not just putting, what you call it, security protocols on your systems to stop malware coming in and stuff. It starts with all of us protecting information that we have. So these will be two of the things I would leave as messages to keep in mind.
Andrew, what's a key takeaway from your end?
I think there's a great point there Mohammed raised about the security by design. I'd echo that wholeheartedly. I mentioned before the thinking that I've been doing and the programs that we've been implementing has this security as a kind of foundation. I think building that culture of cybersecurity within the organization is really important. I mentioned before about managing the risk of cyber attack and having a holistic business view of that. Some key points. This convergence of technology is really interesting me as well. It brings about many opportunities, but also some potential risks. And I think echoing Mohammed's point there about security by design and having that culture of awareness and building that into the program is going to be key. And then certainly the thinking about how do you deal with managing a cybersecurity program. Getting your own house in order is obviously important, but many of us are involved in globally interconnected businesses. So we need to think about the security. We're only as strong as the weakest link is the phrase, isn't it? So we need to think about the security aspects of the whole value chain. So that's something I'd urge people to be cognizant of.
Great. Behram, your key message, key takeaway? Behram, are you still with us? Or I think Behram has some other commitment. He was asking to jump. Bilal, can you take it? Your key message, key takeaway you want to give to audience?
So what I think that, technology, again, it's a cross-sectoral thing. When we say that it's a cross-sectoral thing, that means it is going to transform our association, which we are talking with right now, ICAP. It is going to transform health. It is going to transform finance, agriculture, in everything. So when we know that we are going to be transformed digitally, that means we have to adopt accordingly. So my message is that, we need to not only learn the techniques and the trends of our own specialty or the field, but we also have to learn the technology as well. But whenever you are making any programs, as Sir has mentioned that, security by design is important, I would add another thing, privacy by design is another important thing which you need to cater for, because these two elements are going to play a very important role in future. As we are moving towards the digital transformation, these two are going to be more and more important. So I think one, that technology is going to disrupt your field as well. So you need to upgrade yourself, as Behram was telling, that from the typewriting to when the computer came in, people actually moved towards that part. Similarly, there are many accounting softwares available. There are more to come. And then they'll be doing a lot of stuff. The softwares will be providing you lots of services. So I think that one, you need to learn the technology, and when you are actually implementing it, you need to take care of the security and the privacy and its use. The use should be accordingly. So these are my 2 cents on it.
Well, guys, thank you very much for your time and very valuable insight. I learned a lot today as well. I think I'm more learning today than I was yesterday. And I really appreciate your insight, sharing with our audience, with our pen, with all together. Thank you very much. I would like to now hand over back to Madam Chairperson, 𝐁𝐸𝐿 Kotwal.
Thank you, Nadeem, for conducting a wonderful session with Sir Andrew, Behram, and Bilal. So we've had an interesting discussion on various topics. I won't keep repeating, But I think what it reminds me of my Unilever days when I was the ISO as well as handling some finance function, because in the role as an ISO, they wanted an independent person other than an IT person to handle security matters or keep an oversight. And who better can it be than the finance function or the finance professionals? I think in today's talk, it was very clear that we need to reskill and upskill ourselves. The digital world will change a lot of things where some of the traditional jobs will go away, new opportunities will be created. So that's where we require gearing up. And we are now almost at the end of the session. And I would now like to invite Mr. Rana Usman Khan, our previous chairman of the digital board, to give a vote of thanks. And I must also give him credit for today's event because he was the one who actually initiated this topic and this theme which we are carrying forward. Mr. Rana Usman is the partner and a board member of Yusuf Adil Chartered Accountants based in Lahore. He has served for over 25 years and has extensive experience of handling a diverse portfolio of multinational and local organizations. He has rich experience in audit, tax, compliance, and advisory services. Mr. Rana has served as a council member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan and also served as vice president. For 3 consecutive years, he has served as the Northern Region Committee and was also elected as the chairman. Over to you, Rana Sahab.
Thank you very much, Khurshid, for such an elaborative introduction at the end. And definitely I'm here to say a vote of thanks to all of you, all the panelists and all the participants. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Honorable President, ICAP, Mr. Ishfaq Tola. I think he had to leave because of his pressing commitments. He had to travel to Islamabad. Khurshid Kotwal, the newly elected chairperson of this DAB, Digital Assurance and Accounting Board. As you said, I'm the previous chair, so you are the incoming chair, rather the current chair. Respectable speakers and panelists, Mohammed J.S. Sher, Adnan, Andrew McDonald, Bilal Abbasi, Behram Farooq, and last but not the least, my friend Nadeem Malik, who has been a great support during our tenure at DAB during the last 2-3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Very good evening, very good morning, good afternoon, whatever is applicable to you. So please accept from my side, from Pakistan. I must say it has been a great session. A very insightful deliberation discussion has taken place on the data and its privacy, its security, governance, and all that. I think Andrew is going to have his breakfast. I could see that. So we are going to have our dinner. So I think it's equally good that at the end of the session we'll be fed with something. I'm confident that this has been a great learning for all of us, for our members. Definitely when we were conceiving this topic, after doing few things like doing webinars on data analytics, webinars on artificial intelligence, webinars on digitalization, and particularly introducing and launching a long duration course of data analytics, I think this was the one topic which we felt that it is more critical and relevant of today's careers of our profession. So we thought of bringing different experts of different aspects of this data security and governance and definitely privacy, all these aspects. And I'm really feeling great that whatever we thought, it has been a lot more than that. I personally, let me confess that it has been a great learning for me. As Nadeem said, I'm more learned as I was 2 hours before, certainly on this data security side, and particularly its different aspects. I mean, the data privacy is different, governance is different, security is different. So we all need to understand these concepts, and I think very elaborative and intellectual discussion has taken place. Thank you very much all for making this event a successful event, particularly speakers, panelists across the world for sparing your valuable time, and particularly Andrew for waiting long for breakfast, and all the participants, of course, across the globe. You all spared your valuable time, and I'm quite sure that this has been very beneficial for all of us. As outgoing chair of this DAP, I also owe a lot of thanks to my digital assurance board colleagues from various segments of our industry profession for making great contributions throughout the last tenure, which I certainly owe to all of them, particularly the incoming chairperson. I mean, she has been very active contributor during that time. And now I'm quite sure that under her able leadership, there is a lot more to happen, inshallah. And whatever we started, the first steps, few steps we could take during the last 2.5 years, inshallah, it is going to be a lot more to be added to that. And of course, Nadeem Malik, I mean, I owe a lot of specific thanks to him for his great contribution during the meeting sessions of our board. Conceiving ideas of these areas to work on, to have webinars, and then arranging speakers, coordination. I mean, a lot more. He has done a great contribution, Nadeem Saab. I'm really thankful to you for that. Last but not the least, the secretariat. I mean, they have been really, forthcoming, and they have been really putting a lot of work, a lot of hard work, particularly Umair and Ambreen. They have done a great job. And I'm sure that they'll continue doing this great work under the able leadership of Kotwal. I see a lot more happening. I will not take much of your time. Will say once again, thank you very much for sparing your valuable time, making great contributions, and of course, all the participants, sparing their valuable time, and of course, they had great learning. So thank you once again. And Allah Hafiz, bye-bye, take care, stay blessed, and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Great, guys. Good to see you guys.
Thank you, Rana sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, participants, for attending this program. With this, I close today's session, and really grateful to all of you, including our esteemed guests, for coming and sharing their views and making us more knowledgeable. Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye. Stay blessed. Stay safe.